ultimately, yes, it is all about the people. Even when we're moving into a world of AI, it is.
Welcome to a brand new episode of Starts at the Top, our podcast about leading differently. I'm Paul Thomas.
And I'm Zoe Amma. Our podcast exists to help leaders and their teams understand what they need to do differently today to prepare for the world of tomorrow. We started Starts at the Top as a podcast about digital disruption, but we soon realised that leaders were telling us about something more important and urgent, about how traditional ways of leading had changed forever.
We make it our mission to speak to leaders who are carving out new ways of leading, and we cover topics from emerging tech to inclusion, from remote work to mental health and climate change. Basically, all of the subjects that today's leaders need to be across in 2024.
And this isn't about shiny corporate case studies. It's about lessons learned and progress made the hard way, and crucially, how that can inspire others.
And in this episode, we're sharing our conversation with Saeed Dajani, who has been head of digital at Diabetes UK for the past 10 years. Now, this interview was recorded back in September 2023, which is over a year ago. And since that time, not only has an entire season of Starts at the Top gone by, but just as we were planning to finally release Saeed's episode, he got in touch to tell us he was leaving his role after 11 years in order to seek a new challenge.
Yes, I had a lovely email from Saeed, who I've known for many years, to tell me that he was moving on to an exciting new chapter, but also to say that he would still be keen for us to share his episode with our listeners. Now, Paul, as part of our conversation with Saeed, he was talking about longevity in his role, and he shared some interesting thoughts about the benefits of working for one organisation for a long time. And I know this is a conversation that you had with someone at the weekend. Do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's a subject that I'm quite interested in, not least because my last role was at a company where I spent 10 years working there. And I think it's interesting, particularly at a time where I wonder if we're trending away from longevity towards a future of work where we work at more places for less time. And I was at a conference on Saturday. No, sorry, I was at an unconference on Saturday. We can talk more about unconferences in another episode because it was not my first, but it was really, really good and refreshing. And I met someone there who I hadn't seen for quite some time. And we started to talk about his role and how he'd been at the same business for over 12 years. And he had the same kind of experience as me. He told me that he'd really got no intention of moving. And in his time at the company, he'd had several different roles in several different teams and built a wealth of experience and knowledge about how the business he works for works. And I think we heard the same from Saeed, that he felt that having worked within the same organization had given him an advantage in some respects. I mean, you'll hear from him in the interview, but he talks about building social capital within his organization and how that helps him to know when to push for change and when to step back from change. And I think it's really interesting and makes me reflect on my own experiences of being in one place for a long time. So, how about you, Zoe? What's the longest you've been in one organisation?
Well, my current role, actually, I was just thinking as you were talking about that, Paul, this is the job that I have done for the longest. So I set up my organisation in 2013. So this would have been when my daughter was only about 6 or 7 months old. So I set up a business with a toddler and a baby, which is proof that I am, that's not that's not a sensible decision in any way, but it has worked out well. So that is very good. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I suppose with because I started it, and because digital and AI is moving so fast now, it kind of feels like a different place every couple of years. But I don't know how I would manage being in one place for that long. And I mean, kudos to anyone who does it, because I think those people are very much the stalwarts of any organization. And when we go in and do our consultancy work, they're often the people I gravitate towards because they're holding so much organizational knowledge. But how about you? Because you, back in the day, I know, were in one role where we met for quite a long time, weren't you?
Yeah, so I started. So it was Grant Thornton. I started there in internal comms. I did a sort of an internal digital role. I started getting interested in social media, made a few moves towards challenging a little bit what was going on internally around social media, and then sort of made it my job to go and infiltrate the marketing team a bit and worked within marketing. So I did internal comms to marketing, and then got involved in a sort of a digital change, digital transformation role after I'd married the two things together, and even did a bit of client work with the business. So turned my sort of skills to the external world, and I think that kept me interested, and it probably kept the business interested to one degree or another, if you know what I mean. It's interesting that you sort of around you you'd have people coming in and doing a job for 18 months, 2 years, and moving on, but you sort of stayed the course. I think it can have its disadvantages too. So my thought process around this has always been that perhaps my downfall, if I had a downfall, that's a bit dramatic, isn't it? Downfall. I think that the challenge I had was that because I did different roles and because I sort of jumped around teams, I think sometimes it was quite difficult to place me. And perhaps when things like budgeting came up and those sorts of questions, I think it was challenging for people to say, well, is he in marketing? Should he come under my budget, or is he in communication? Should he come under my budget? And I think that can be a bit of a challenge from time to time. But I think generally I would side with Said and with the colleague, the friend I met at the weekend, that I think it can build you so much social capital within an organisation, can give you such an ability to sort of move from team to team, the respect and the knowledge that you've sort of been there, done that, and you understand the culture innately. So I think I'd probably land on the side of it being a really strong advantage, especially in a change role, as I said, to know when to push and when to back off. But ultimately, I do wonder whether there is a sort of a sense of, right, now they can't really place me, and maybe that's a bit more of a challenge to the role. But ultimately, I think it was good.
Yeah, it's a great point. I guess it depends on the context, doesn't it? And also the kind of evolution track that the organization itself is on as well. And, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you and I, we know a lot of leaders, and we've seen a lot of leaders go through different arcs in their careers as well. And there is an element of luck and timing, isn't there, as much
Mm,
as talent and focus and the ability to bring people together to achieve something. I mean, there is an element of serendipity in any career, isn't there, for better or worse?
yeah, definitely. And again, at the conference at the weekend, one of the questions that came up, one of the sort of the big topics of interest that sort of came up that people wanted to talk about was AI. And I think there was a reflection at that point that,
Hooray!
yeah, AI is, here to stay. Didn't we have this conversation 30, 40 years ago about email? Didn't we have this conversation 15 years ago about social media? There's a sort of a sense that if you've seen these things through, then you have the experience, the sort of the lived experience of working within them. And I think having that background of sort of being at the forefront and the heyday of social media probably gives you a little bit of an advantage when it comes to talking about AI. I don't know, but I think being in an organization and having seen it all across the period of time, I think has to be an advantage in the end. And anyway, I think our listeners will choose for themselves once they've heard Saeed, and I'm sure listeners will have their own experiences of being in one place for a long time. Not everyone jumps from role to role, so yeah, interesting.
100%. And I think Saeed has got a great story to tell. And like you were saying, he was there right from the start of that digital journey at Diabetes UK. And actually, that's quite a rare and precious thing, because if you are getting hired now as a CDO or a head of digital, that organization will have been doing a lot of digital activities for some time. And there is something about being at the start of evolution or an innovation, which is always really interesting, because you're kind of at the nub of the change. So yes, I think it's really interesting. He's got some great stuff there.
And Zoe, just briefly before we go to the conversation with Said, you've got some big news about the Charity Digital Skills report next year.
I do, yes. I have some news about the Charity Digital Code of Practice, which is being updated, and we will say more about this in a upcoming episode very soon, where we will be talking about AI in more depth. But in a nutshell, what's happening is the Charity Digital Code of Practice, which I founded or helped found in 2018, is being updated for the AI age, which is really exciting. So AI will be a key focus of it, as will other areas of digital. And as you will know, 2018 was obviously a very, very different point in digital. You know, that was the time when we were all on Twitter, and digital services were a bit of a twinkle in everyone's eye, rather than something that very much became a reality during the pandemic. So there will be a lot to do to update the code and make it fit for the present as well as the future. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to be involved in it as chair of the code. Really lucky to have a great steering group, including the Charity Commission, WCVA, Akivo, and others. And there'll be loads of opportunities for charities to get involved in helping shape the code through the user research we're going to do. We'll do a big consultation exercise as well. That will be next year. And also there's an opportunity to get involved in the review board as well. So I'll pop the link in the show notes, and we're really keen to hear charities' thoughts so that we can shape the code and they inform the code and the insights that will ultimately help make it what it is.
Sounds absolutely amazing, and it's testament to all the hard work. So well done, proud of you.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
But now for our conversation with Said Dajani.
We are very excited to welcome Said Dajani to Starts at the Top. Said has been Head of Digital at Diabetes UK for the past 10 years. His initial focus was on establishing the digital team, bringing in new roles covering areas like analytics and UX. He then successfully made the business case to move away from proprietary platforms towards open source solutions, and the digital platform was rebuilt in 2017. The next stage of the charity's digital transformation saw the digital team disbanded, with colleagues moving to newly established teams covering content, marketing and analytics. Said's team now focuses on supporting the network of Diabetes UK product owners. Harnessing technology became an explicit part of the Diabetes UK strategy, and Said co-leads work on this outcome driver, with the main focus being the move to a new CRM, which will launch next year. Said also sponsors the Commercialising Digital Opportunities programme, which has recently launched a UX participant recruitment and consultancy offer, and opened the Listening Lab, a UX facility based at Diabetes UK's headquarters in Whitechapel. As well as providing a free resource for colleagues, the lab is available commercially and at discounted rates for registered charities. There's so much here that we're looking forward to talking to Said about. Thank you so much for coming on Starts at the Top.
Well, thank you both.
Brilliant. So there's lots we want to chat to you about today, and I'm especially pleased to have you here because I know that you and I have talked over the years about your digital journey at Diabetes UK, which I have always admired and recommended to lots of other charities. Could you maybe give us a bit more of a flavour of what that journey's looked like along the way?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was covered in the intro. There's definitely when you're starting at a new organisation, it's something around time and place, but also looking at that organisation and its journey, if you like, on digital. So I think Diabetes UK was in the very early stages when I started, and functions had been developed within the organisation, but there wasn't an explicit digital team. So there's confusion about who decided what and who developed products, and it was a little bit of a mess that needed untangling. The team itself were great, and I think one of the things I'm most proud about is a WhatsApp group of ex-colleagues, which is still very active and kind of giving support to each other, and that's been something consistent. But then I think you go through that process, you build. I mean, first I should say this isn't the same for every organisation, but with us, you went through the process of building that team, and then you start to come up against blockers because of that digital specialism, or because you have all of the specialists in one area. And so once we replatformed, it was very much then thinking we'd formed a new strategic marketing team, a new content and news team. So it was thinking about how the digital roles would work within those teams. And I mean, that's been a big challenge. I think a challenge, obviously, they're colleagues that you work with closely and line manage, and that's a difficult conversation to have. But also, my role has kind of changed into less command and control and more about influencing change. And I think, and I hope I've got better at it over time, but certainly the transition to that is not easy if you're used to kind of doing things and delivering, and then it's very much more making sure that essentially that we're all singing to the same hymn sheet. My team now very much focuses on our product owners. We've got excellent cohort of product owners, but as you can imagine, sometimes people leave, sometimes arrive at the organization, so you will need to give further effort to supporting them. There's a clear, massive part that my team plays in terms of integration of the platform. So we work with the product owners on technology choices, agency choices, but also particularly data integration. And as part of the harnessing tech work, the last 2.5 years has been about moving to a new CRM, a data hub model, and that will launch in April. So I think what I'm hoping is many of the frustrations that are not on the front end of the platform, because we've got, I think, without being complacent, very good products and a good team. I think that the issues have been around data integration, complexity with old systems, and quality of data. And that's all things that we're dealing with as part of this new work. So it's been a changing role. I think anyone in this role has to deal with those changes. It's not it doesn't go one way. Sometimes, two steps forward, one step backwards. Also, not all organizations are the same or at the same point. So I'm not saying that there is a model that you build a team, you then distribute it, but it's what we've done.
Brilliant. Yeah, loads of great things there. And with that point about distribution and starting to evolve, how did you know when the time was right?
So, I mean, I think there's definitely you'll get signals, if you like, from the business. I mean, clearly, when you have a marketing department who are frustrated because they own the budgets and maybe the relationships with some of the kind of the key budget holders, and they don't really understand or know enough about the channel, that's not because of their own expertise. It's just because it's been siphoned off to a digital specialist, and then similarly, on the other side, the danger is that digital becomes, if you like, just a function that you talk to just to implement things and not to get involved at the very beginning. So I think probably on the marketing side was the first signals that, really we needed to do things differently. But the other thing was we'd made the business case for big investment and overhauling of our infrastructures you talked about earlier. And it seemed like the natural point because the organization was then, at least the directorate I work in was going through a point of change. New teams were being established. And it's something I'd been talking to my director, Kath, who's now chief exec at Tommy's, for a while about, but it had perhaps been more theoretical. And so then it became the moment. So I think there's something about being not opportunistic, but making the most of things when the time is right.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, isn't it? And with that journey that you've been on, is there anything that you've learned along the way where you think, oh, I'd really love to share this with other charities?
I think the thing that, and it's kind of consistent with now what we're trying to do with the lab, is the focus. I mean, digital isn't the only discipline to have brought the focus on our users, but that kind of really discipline focus, building tools to understand and to describe what users want, being able to prioritize them. That kind of focus is actually easily transferable to other areas of the charity. And I heard something. There's quite a lot of change at our organisation at the moment. The chief exec, Chris Askew, has just left, and we've got new um, brilliant appointments in Colette, but also our director of policy, Bridget, left. And she said something quite interesting. She was being interviewed by our learning and development kind of manager, and she was basically asked for, like, what's one piece of advice that you would give people, and it was, don't just stick to your tram lines. So by which she meant, be prepared to be a bit nosy and to get involved in things that maybe aren't your specialism. And I think that's particularly important, I think, for the digital discipline. So I think I probably should have done that maybe earlier, but I think we're beginning to do that now.
It's really interesting, isn't it? That nosiness, that exploration point is, I think, absolutely crucial to somebody in a role like yours or somebody in a digital role, because you've mentioned earlier on that idea of shifting your style towards influence and not sort of command and control. And I think it's that influence that you can grow because you start to understand the impact of what you can do and what you can bring to each of the other teams. So can you tell me a bit more about how you sort of made that change to be more of a digital influence within the organisation?
Yeah, and I must say, I've been at Diabetes UK 10 years, so rightfully or wrongfully, I've got lots of social capital around the organisation, and we had the pandemic in the middle of this. So a lot of what I've drawn on is that longevity and those relationships, and I do sometimes imagine myself at different places and struggle to think how I would do that work, because a lot of this is based on, yeah, social capital. You've achieved things before. People therefore respect you for that, and they would respect your inputs. And you begin to understand people as well, what makes them tick. So I have to say, I'm not sure, because I've been at the one organization for a long time and I've drawn so much on that. I'm not sure I would have had such an easy ride of it elsewhere. And so I think it's been a really interesting kind of learning period for me about how to change, how to get things done, know when to push things, know when to not, know when to bide your time. But there is also a sense of, and this isn't going to me, bigging up myself, but I think I find it difficult sometimes when I see organizations with leadership, or particularly leadership in the digital space, where it changes so regularly, how you can build up that sense of longevity and understanding historically of what's gone on in the past, what's worked and what hasn't. So it's definitely been trial and error. I think I am getting better at it over the years, but there's a big part of me that wonders, Saeed, how much of this is because, you've been here 10 years. And
Yeah, and I completely understand that. I did 10 years in my last organisation, and I guess there's that idea of getting out of your tram lines in the organisation I worked in. By some was seen as a strength. It's fair to say, and I think you'll probably find that, won't you? But that if you step outside and you go off and you can be helpful and additive to the process or the way that another team is working or looking at the world, then that's helpful. But I guess also there's an element of, well, why do you care? This is a very sort of siloed environment that we can work in. Marketing and HR and other teams are quite used to working on their own. And when you come in as a digital person, I think the really interesting part is that you want to get involved with all of those teams and want to have a discussion about how things can change. And I think that only comes from longevity, doesn't it? The idea that you can spot the things that need to change. And I guess, Zoe, there's a point here, isn't there, about working now as consultants. We're kind of brought in to correct something or to show a new path quite a lot of the time. And the first part of the work that I always want to do is look at the people that are already there, the people that understand what's happening And usually it's that frustration that they can't quite get the message out to the rest of the business because they are stuck in that little pocket. That's the trick, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it becomes even more important when, we're looking at developments that aren't new, but that are coming very much to the fore now. Conversational AIs are clearly one where, to be honest, there are potential impacts in every bit of the charity, and it's understanding where we'd want to deploy things, how we'd want to approach things. Are we the type of the organization that would be at the forefront of this, or would be a bit more cautious? Um, and and then absolutely looking at the people involved, how they would approach change. These things are, like conversational AI, very much in the news. People are aware of them. Conversations that I have, I'm acutely aware that people are thinking about, their jobs. They're thinking about how the world of work will change. So you have to approach this from human beings first. It is all about human beings, and I don't think that there's any kind of relationships I've had which have been unrecoverable. There is some connection that you can make with people in order to have shared, even if it's just around kind of shared objectives. But ultimately, yes, it is all about the people. Even when we're moving into a world of AI, it is.
Can you tell us what you're doing around AI?
Yeah, so I think the way we'd approach it is certainly on the, I would not say cautious, but we certainly wouldn't want to be, I think, experimenting unnecessarily. A lot of this technology, not necessarily some of the conversational AI, but where AI links up with data, depends on the infrastructure that we're going to bring in April. So there is to a certain extent some of the more exciting pieces that we can do in that data side of things are not on hold, and we are doing proof of concepts, etc. But the full value to the organization, I don't think would be kind of seen before then. I think what I'm keen to do is to identify use cases which will show people how this technology can help them do their job better, not replace them. So examples we're exploring are, it currently takes about 6 months to train up a helpline operator. They're very good at their job, but diabetes is complicated. There are many different kind of facets that they have to deal with, and some of that information is changing all the time. So thinking about how we can use some of the conversational AI models and train them up on a set of both the existing documentation that they're trained on, but also the audio transcripts, which there are many going back kind of years. So that's an interesting place for us to play, because we're clearly, and no one wants to replace the human touch. If I got diagnosed with diabetes, I want to speak to a person. But the ability to either speak or to do a chat to a person where you've got immediately the right information based upon historically, but also what is being recorded, what you can hear from the person, and it's constantly throwing up ideas for you. That's a really, to me, interesting use of it. Teams are also, there isn't a very command and control approach to this as well. Teams, ChatGPT is freely available. So teams are already beginning to use it for things like copywriting and doing small tests. And there's some interesting stuff out there, and I really want to encourage that experimentation. But I'm also aware that, as I said before, that people are scared about new technology as well. So how can you bring them alongside you?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So speaking of all things innovative, let's talk about your listening lab offer, because that was a really interesting development that prompted our conversation today. So we touched on it in the introduction. Can you tell people a bit more about what the offer is and how it will work in practice?
Yeah, sure. If I just begin where it began. So this
Great.
was once again a conversation with my then director, Kath Abrahams, and Actually, a lot of this began in the space which I think a lot of charities are looking at, which is how can we diversify away from just traditional income streams. And because diabetes is so influenced by technology and med tech, but also how technology companies approach things like behavior change, etc., we would get a constant stream of companies coming to us, not really understanding us. Can we have your endorsement? Can we have your content? Can we? And we, frankly, not really understanding them and their world. Um, and this is a range of everyone from startups through to kind of big established kind of companies. So as well as there being potentially a commercial offer there, there's also something around our mission, because diabetes is so influenced by technology. We have to understand it. We can't abdicate. We understand the NHS, like most health charities, but we need to understand this um, commercial world and understand what makes them tick. And essentially, I suppose what we came up with was the things that health charities certainly should be doing, which is representing their community and the voice of their community to ensure that those products are built and developed with them in mind. So the focus was on user experience. We began and have for a while now been using our website to recruit people for our own work, but also for work for others. So people working on largely digital health products, but also sometimes ideas, campaigns. And the advantages are our website, because of the enormity of the numbers involved with diabetes, there is a lot of traffic. And so therefore we can recruit people, not in the way that the normal recruitment companies would do. We don't have a bank of 10,000 people, but we have essentially pop-ups on the website. And that means that, you sign up for a test next Thursday, you turn up, rather than, oh, did I sign up to that? So it's very, we find the conversion rates are very good, and we can also reach what may be harder to reach for some of those recruitment companies. So people who are at a particular stage of a condition. Unfortunately, again, people with diabetes quite often will have other conditions as well. So that's where it kind of began. There was always this idea that we would have a dedicated UX consultancy service added to this offer. And so we're beginning to look out for recruitment. And I would say, if anyone is really interested in working for a charity where you can benefit the charity and all of its digital products, but also have the variety that comes with working on a variety of commercial work, please do contact me, because we're looking for that special person to help lead that offer. And then I brought in a guy, John Fothergill, to lead the wider piece of work, commercializing digital opportunities. And I think immediately his first thought was, look, we can build all of this together. We don't have a track record currently, and one of the ways we can begin to have a track record is to build a lab, so people can get to know us, get to know what our offer is. We have spare space, like many organizations now. The head office isn't being used as much as it could be. And so we've spent the last couple of months building this lab. And the team have done a great job, and we've hired a lab supervisor, and we can do all of the kind of classic UX testing, but also really interestingly use it as a place for focus groups, trying to move as well as this commercial offer, this culture internally. So UX agencies can be quite expensive for charities. So you end up kind of using them at the beginning of a project when you've got a budget, but not throughout. Our sector is well known for, talking the talk about representing our, users, but how often do we have the ability to be able to talk to them? We talked about people with lived experience. So really want a culture at Diabetes UK of, there's this amazing facility up here. Yes, it's being paid for from commercial clients, but it's free to you guys. And you can now, really do this end to end. So you can be testing right from the idea stage all the way through to a kind of mature product that you're just testing a few things on. So that's where we are with it.
Wow, that's fantastic and really inspiring. And it reminds me of a conversation I had yesterday with someone working in innovation in quite a big charity who's also looking at where they can monetize some aspects of their offer. And, good on you. If you've got that expertise, you've got that experience, you've got that access to users, then it's a win-win all round, isn't it? And you talked about how culture might need to shift a bit internally to accommodate this offer. Can you tell us a bit about what that could look like?
It's a bit building upon what I was
Mm.
saying before. I think this is this kind of, I think, certainly the larger health charities, things like the way that we plan, etc., mean that we essentially plan, the solution right at the very beginning. So we've got our problem, we've got our solution. We haven't tested it out with anyone, but we've put it into a budget and then we deliver it the next year. And that's inevitable kind of with that kind of planning culture. But at what point do we kind of go, do actually people with diabetes even want this? Does this reflect what they're telling us? And we should be doing, because our sector, led the way when it came to user-centered service design. We talk to government and elsewhere about how the importance of involvement is, and we do involvement. I'm not saying we haven't done involvement in the past, but I think this just gives the opportunity for the organisation to have a facility to be able to do this whenever we need to. So, for example, one of the areas that we're exploring at the moment, kind of strategically, is the whole issue around stigma around diabetes. So stigma around diabetes is going to be different from, almost to the individual level. I mean, the stigmas that people, but there's also some kind of macro stigmas across the piece. There are stigmas that people with type 1 will face that type 2 won't, and vice versa. There's probably some, and there's definitely misunderstandings between the two types of diabetes in terms of the community itself. So how do we really kind of get really understand that? I personally think there's nothing better than sitting down with other decision makers and watching someone being interviewed, or a focus group where people can bounce off each other. And I think that's the advantage of the face-to-face element of the listening lab. We've got a massive, great viewing room where, and I've seen it happen already in one of the commercial pieces of work that we did, where you see that kind of moment where the penny drops. Of course, they don't like it because of this, or of course, and it sometimes we're just too close to things. I'm too close to certain things. I can't take a step back. So we've thought ourselves into, in that example, what stigma is, and we don't have that ability to be surprised. And I want us to be surprised.
It's amazing that it's not exclusive to the non-profit and charity world as well. The amount of sort of looking in at yourself the whole time and not actually looking at the end user and what the end users want, your customers. Ultimately, I work with accountancy firms and all sorts of different people, and accountants. I always have a go at accountants on this podcast. It's not fair, and I work with so many of them. I'm not having a go. It's all based in love. But they're very good at talking about what they can do and why what they can do is different to others. But they're not always that great at asking, well, what do you want and how do you want this service and how do you want it delivered? So I think it's refreshing to know that there are organisations out there that can help, or who are looking at that, and even more refreshing to know that you have a facility there that is available to help people to do that. I think it's
so we've got a really supportive board of trustees, and right from the very beginning, it was as long as this can benefit someone with diabetes in some way. It doesn't have to be specific to diabetes. With Diabetes UK, it doesn't have to be UK based, but also they saw the benefit, and certainly Chris, the chief exec who just left, saw the benefit in this being an offer for the wider sector, definitely health charities, to have a facility there that with reduced rates, which is what we've done. So health charities can use the facility at cheaper rates than commercial charities, commercial organisations. So.
And if I'm a charity out there now thinking this sounds amazing, how do I get started with it? What should those people do?
So awkwardly, the website hasn't quite launched yet, but it would be listeninglab.co.uk, and it is imminently to be launched. In the meantime, you can contact me at said.dajani@diabetes.org.uk, and I can put you in touch with the team who can show you around and talk you through the facility, how you can book it.
Great.
I think the other really interesting thing, I think, with the piece of work was, and this was something as well that the outgoing chief exec wanted to try and look at, was how entrepreneurial can charities really be? So it's not really entrepreneurial because, ultimately I'm not paying rent, number one, for a UX lab. So, but it is entrepreneurial, and it is in the course of trying to bring something like this to life, you do rub up against big organization thinking, where you have to be perhaps a bit more nimble and move quicker. And one of the things that Chris was really interested was to not only to see whether we could do it, but to understand by doing it where we were rubbing up against old ways of doing things that the traditional charity model was putting forward. And I think that's really interesting, because therein lies discussions around, can you actually do it within a big organization? Is it something that instead needs to be spun off and benefit the charity? All of these questions, which are questions for us to come down the road. And the other, I suppose, the other principle has been, at least certainly some, the organisations that I've worked with, lots and lots of talk about ideas, but sometimes you just have to learn by doing. So we've learnt. I've learned a whole lot of things about UXIT, things that I wouldn't have known before, frankly. Certainly, but there's a lot more than that. There's things that you just learn by doing it, and ultimately, sometimes you just have to do it. You can have the best business plan in the world, but until you try doing it, and I think this is where John, who works for the team, is a big ally, because frankly, there could be a massive market out there that you hadn't even thought about when you did your business plan, but when you uncover it, you need to kind of go for it.
Yeah.
We're all after those sure things, aren't we? We're all after those projects that, have a clear outcome, not the ones that are sort of let's have a go. And especially when you're spending money that, is carefully donated by people quite often that,
Yeah, and rightfully so. And ultimately, I suppose the flip side of us not being totally entrepreneurial is we will be judged by that. If this doesn't make a return, both in terms of the social investment, but also in terms of income, then it's donors' money. So yeah, we would be held account for that. So, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
But if it works out, which hopefully it will, I mean, it could be such an amazing opportunity and a great case study for the rest of the sector, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on. And I think you're right. I think there's something there about that shift in skill set, isn't there? So the charity that I used to work for many years ago, before I started doing this, they were trying to develop a consultancy office around tech. And it was, it was a bit of a challenge in some ways, because there was a change in culture required, as you were saying, but also that sense of managing relationships in a slightly different way. So trying to develop those, almost like those account management skills and those business development skills, is a bit of a change of gear, isn't it? So it's great that you've got people who've come into the organisation to help support you all on that journey.
Yes, very reliant on a really good team. And actually, this, if we encompass this as the UX offer, is only one of a number of very, very interesting ideas, some of which financially would potentially have a lot bigger, impact on Diabetes UK, but are just in that kind of stage of almost landing. So I don't particularly want to jinx it at the moment. So this is, I suppose, what I want to say is this is the first of quite a few commercial opportunities that we're beginning to kind of develop out, and things that maybe, people think, okay, Diabetes UK do things a bit differently here. So watch the space.
I love this idea, because it's all about how you use all that expertise and that insight to really play to your strengths with this offer, isn't it? In a way, there's such a massive differentiator. So yeah, I can't wait to see what happens next. I hope you'll come back on and tell us more about where you've got to.
Definitely, yeah.
Lovely. Paul, is there anything else you want to ask?
There was a question that came into mind, and it's completely and utterly gone from my brain. But it was around the.
It's about accountants, Paul.
No,
it's always about accountants with Paul, or football.
Or football. Yeah, I was just thinking. No, there was something as you were speaking at the end there, and I've lost my train of thought. But there was something I thought we could go off into a whole other avenue of exploration. It's completely gone from my brain now.
It'd be unsurprising, for me to say to you that, one of the reasons this is an open door is because diabetes is so dependent on technology and data. And actually, we have funded for years, founded by H.G. Wells nearly 100 years ago, research, biomedical research. But now this then moves into a technology world where it's less, about a research grant and potentially more around investments. And all the other areas, I suppose, is the amount of data that people with diabetes are generating, and how that data itself, coming from the devices that they're using, is of massive value in its own right. There's something around data, and there's something around how we as a charity think about our investments probably in the same ways as we do when we're funding research, biomedical research.
I think possibly the question I was sort of trying to get at was around this idea, and I'm always fascinated by it, that the charity sector in particular is in a position where, yes, there is competition for fundraising and donations and things like that, but in terms of what you are trying to achieve in understanding diabetes, there are lots of other organizations out there with the same mission. So being able to bring those organizations together under one roof to start to really work together to understand what the issues are and how they affect people with diabetes, I think is really, really clear. And you see that with a lot of charities where that collaboration, especially bringing corporate organizations and health organizations into the picture as well, who can really, really start to solve these big societal issues together.
So unfortunately, I think it's incumbent on us to do this, because whether we like it or not, the NHS there is a shrinking in terms of what the NHS is doing. And just to give one example, all of the exciting technology around type 1 diabetes, for a significant percentage of people with type 2 diabetes, they would benefit from it as well. But there is no way that the NHS in its current financial state would be trying to extend it to the millions involved. So, but as a commercial offer, as a commercial opportunity, that's enormous. And if you then move away from a strictly UK approach and NHS and look at the global south and think about type 2 diabetes, that's an enormous potential market. So the people who might be able to bring about change might not be historically the people that we've talked to in the past, and we need to understand them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sadie. I think that's a great point, and it's so good to hear about a charity that's really leaning further into its convening power and using digital as an enabler to really make that stuff happen and help provide better support and products for the community you serve. So yeah, we're so excited to hear about where you go next on this journey. So please do keep us posted.
Well, yeah, and obviously an invite to both of you to come down and see the listing lab, and I can show you more.
Ooh, sounds exciting.
Sounds like a very good idea.
Yeah, we could even do a podcast recording from there, Paul.
You could do, yeah, you could do.
Oh, that is an idea. Lovely. Right, we're definitely going to add that to the list. We might even bring some cake along.
Is that all you've got to offer?
We've got more. We've got more than cake, but we find that cake is often a theme that we come back to.
Unfortunately, and it's even the same at Diabetes UK. the cakes, unbelievable. Every charity I've ever worked at, best cake makers in the
Oh,
world.
really?
They all seem to kind of come into our sector. So, but it's not good for my own self-discipline.
Well, I guess it's nice to have an occasional treat, isn't it? Oh, well, good to know. Lovely. Well, we will put that on our list of plans. Great stuff. Thank you so much, Saeed. It's been brilliant hearing about where you've got to, and also where you're planning to go next. I'm sure it will be inspiring for a lot of the charities listening to this podcast. So thank you so much for making the time to come on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, pleasure.
And anyone who is interested, just contact me.
Great. And we will put some links in the show notes, and hopefully your website will be launching soon, in which case we can pop that link in the show notes as well.
Thank you to Saeed for making the time to come on Starts at the Top and share his experience with us, even if it was a year ago. Listening back, what a chilled out and relaxed man. He's so experienced. I think Saeed will be on the job market in January, I think I heard. And I don't think he'll be waiting too long for a new opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. So very talented, one of the most interesting people I have ever spoken to in the world of charities and digital, and someone I've learnt so much from every time I've had the pleasure of chatting to him. So thank you, Saeed. That was really interesting and really inspiring.
And as always, we really do appreciate that you've listened all the way to the end of this episode, and thank you so much for doing so. You can support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to us. It really does help us to reach more people, so if you've enjoyed what you've heard, do share us with a friend, pass the message on.
Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks with a brand new episode of Starts at the Top.
See you then, and bye for now.
See you soon.